You are watching a Healing Element podcast special. Show your support by subscribing to the Healing Element podcast YouTube channel. Also, follow us on Instagram at the Healing Element Podcast. Hello and welcome to the Healing Element Podcast. This is a special that we're doing tonight, Return of the Kings, Changing the Game. I have two very special guests with me today. My guest tonight, Dr. Cleo Manago. How'd I do? Manago!
You see Brandon laughing. You see him laughing.
I know. We're just talking in the green room. I've been practicing all day and I'm still messing up live. Perfect. Manago. Manago. You heard me say it in the green room, right?
I heard you say it in the green room after saying it Magano, but yes, I did that.
You didn't have to say that part. And we have Brandon, who is back. I think Brandon has been on almost every episode that I have done on the podcast. So welcome back, Brandon, to the podcast. I really appreciate it. Tonight, our topic is actually several topics we're going to be going into. Our guest tonight will be talking about the current gender war that's taking place in the Black community. We're going to unpack that a little bit and also talk about how this is being shown politically and socially. And the message tonight is how to maneuver politically moving forward, and also how to combat what we're seeing, how Black men are being portrayed on social media and what social mainstream media. So we're going to talk about that and the importance of Black men beginning to take care of their mind, body, and spirit. And also, what does that entail? So we're going to unpack a lot of different topics this evening. Dr. Cleo Manago.
Excellent.
See, I even had the hand gesture. It was right there. He's a noted behavioral health and cultural analyst, writer, educator, and Black and African-focused human rights activist. Brandon, psychotherapist, professor, consultant. He specializes in adverse childhood experiences, historical and intergenerational trauma, social and emotional intelligence, leadership, and youth justice. Both of you, welcome to the podcast. So excited to have you here today.
Thank you for the invitation. Both of you.
Thank you.
It's good to be here.
Thank you. So I wanted to give you a little bit more time, and we'll start with you, Cleo, since I have butchered your last name about 3 times already since we started. We'll start with you.
Cleo was like popping.
That was popping. That's the only thing that was working for me. So I would like you, this is your first time on the platform, so I would like you to provide a little bit more background about yourself, the phenomenal work that you do for our community, for viewers that are listening right now.
All right. Well, I'm going to try to do this quickly because I can be very verbose when I have this request, but I'm going to try to break it down real quick. My work is based on my perspective and theory that Black people are in a white supremacy trauma trance, that we're not fully present, that we're floating kind of at half presence in terms of us being fully present behaviorally as a people, because we're going into several generations of unresolved internalized white supremacy mythology and anti-Black behavior and cultural norms. And it's my perspective that until we actually unpack that phenomena, which is put in place every day, which has new strategies and messaging and techniques to keep it in place, while Black people generally do not even talk about it. We talk about surface issues or blatant white supremacy problems, which should be addressed, like white supremacy, et cetera, and police brutality, et cetera. But there's some intercultural phenomena that keeps us at perpetual risk that is not on in the menu of discussion perpetually, which is why, I don't know if you read the article that was on the front page of the Sun-Times in Chicago today, but they had 90, almost 100 suicides in the Black community across the economic spectrum. And that's just Chicago doing the report. This kind of phenomena is happening all over the country. So my work is teaching us how to decode anti-Black white supremacist norms and unpack the agendas and notice them from close and far, so we can start behaviorally manifesting re-traumatization of the Black body, the Black mind, and the Black spirit in Black relationships. I'm glad to be here because we're going to talk about the gender divide that's going on, which is the newest. Though it's not a brand new spectrum or brand new strategy, they really putting on the gas for the past 10 years regarding breaking up Black men and women and Black people across gender and sexuality issues, so we can be non-loyal to each other and at risk to be relapsing to white supremacist norms and accommodationist behavior. And my goal is to put a wrench in that. That's what I do in my life professionally.
Thank you so much. And Brandon, please provide a little bit more background on the work that you do.
Absolutely. So most of my work is revolved around helping the Black community advance beyond the trauma that we've already experienced and we're currently experiencing, to have much more thriving and healthy lives today and for the generations behind us. And health looks different. It's a very subjective concept. But one thing I do know is this current state, as Cleo talked about, is not good for us. We have a lot of anti-Blackness. We are under this kind of not even a cast, like a spell of white supremacy that we can't shake. And we don't have an ethos as a people that is constructive for us to keep moving forward. So that's where my work stems from. My work is both professional and personal. I grew up in a domestic violence home. I grew up in poverty. I'm a product of WIC, food stamps, and Section 8. And I was able to move through all that to get to places like the University of Minnesota and get a bachelor's degree, then go on and get one master's and go get another master's. And even through all those things that people would assume, oh, he's good, he's all good, the trauma still remains. My community is still in a tough place, and I still have work to do. So that's where my aim is not just looking at these measures of success for Black people as we arrive, but understanding we still got work to do, and healing is a journey. So everything I do is aimed at that.
Thank you so much. And so two people that are probably the best people in our community to have this conversation this evening. And if this is your first time joining a Return of the Kings, basically how this works, I provide a discussion topic, and my two guests, they just kind of dive right in, unpack it, have the conversation. If you would like to add your comments, or if you have a question for our guests this evening, please just drop it in the comments and I'll make sure to bring it up. So that way we can make sure that we're all having the conversation and having dialogue. So to start off, we're going to start off with talking about this gender war that we saw, and we saw that highlighted during the presidential campaign. Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, we saw nothing like, I don't remember seeing anything like this before. And I've worked in politics with really kind of pitting Black men against Black women and saying Black women are the backbone of the Democratic Party, even though Black men voted for this election cycle about 80% for the Democrats. So we'll start off with you, Brandon. What are your thoughts on what you saw with this election? And do you think we saw white supremacy kind of evolving with kind of using the relationship of Black men and Black women?
Absolutely. And I would say it even started before the election season. It's been happening it's always been happening. But since the Trump presidency, we've seen a whole nother unfolding of it. And really what I think it is, I think it's a few things happening at once. One, I think it is white supremacy understanding that they're losing a grip from a global standpoint with competition with folks like China, and they're trying to get their people back in order. But then I also think that there's something taking place within our community where we've had Black women who've been empowered over the last, I would say, 30 years or so to be more economically independent in the family unit. And we have Black men who are 3 generations in to being even more disenfranchised through the prison system and other traps that we have going on. And that these things are coming to a head. So when you hear Black men saying we're going to, be more independent in our voting choice, and we're going to look at more of the policies instead of being wedded to one particular party, that scares the dominant society, it scares the dominant culture, because they've already bet on our vote to be completely democratic that keeps us stuck right in the same place that we're at. So when you see an uptick of Black men voting for Trump, which, I'm not saying that was the right thing or the wrong thing to do, but when you see that uptick, and then we have this conversation that black men are voting against the black people's interest and black men are the white supremacists of the black community. Like what that all that is confusion. And when you're confused, you're easily manipulated, control, and it adds fuel to the fire that's already been burning between black men and black women that comes from our historical trauma.
Thank you, Brandon. Clay, what would you like to add to that?
Every time I hear that line, black men are the white supremacy of the black community, I cannot shake my head. I've tested myself and it won't stay stiff. Because it's so ironic. I mean, black men are the primary quarry, the primary target of white supremacy mythology. The body count is predominantly male as resulting of being targeted. And then we're going to be called the white supremacy of the black community. I mean, it makes no sense. And part of what's in that, which we may or may not get into, is some of this. There's a lot of unpacking, there's a lack of unpacking of black male humanity, black male trauma, and the attack on black men, which has been perpetual since we've been here. And one of the things that has fooled both black men and women inadvertently is that our model for patriarchy and what a man should be comes out of a white supremacy paradigm. It doesn't come from a human, male, nuanced human being paradigm. Whiteness has taught us how to be a man. And over a few hundred years, we got that map. So you got black women, in some instances, using whiteness as a measuring stick. And you even have some black men who are using whiteness as a measuring stick. And they will always lose, going outside of ourselves for value and for what makes us good or not good. So as Brandon mentioned, the attack on black men and the attack on this gender divide precedes Trump. It goes before Obama. It's been happening most of my life where when I was young, I was a product of WIC, et cetera, too, Brandon. Even back in the caveman days when I was little, they had WIC and food stamps and stuff like that. And there was a law or a criteria where men cannot be around, or which you would lose your food stamps, you would lose your public care. So even though there were white people who were also on welfare and to this day make up the majority, they didn't have such stringent rules to face that we in the black community were on Imperial Courts projects, where I used to be in Watts, California. So I think it's important to understand that the issue is not a new phenomenon. The issue is white people moving the polls, changing strategies. Like, for example, there's this major, blatant, Stevie Wonder can see it, biracial push of black men and women having white partners. Now, maybe 15 years ago, or 20 years ago, they would never have done that because that was something they said was offensive and wrong and bad. Now, of course, there's people in the white supremacy landscape who still feel that way. But the social architects understand that one way to put a dent in black loyalty to black people is to put white people in there as who they're going to long to be with. And they're willing to have some casualties because they understand that the larger game we'll still be in psychological control. You got to remember in Azania, which we know of as South Africa, it was, I'm exaggerating to make a point, but it was like 3 white people running the lives of 3 million Africans because they understood how to do systemic work to keep us fragile and unstable enough to see what they're doing. For example, you might have seen the movie Cry Freedom about Stephen Biko. And there's a scene where the young children in Tanzania, which is known as South Africa, are fighting against having to speak Afrikaans. And then when the kids would not give up, they murdered those children in the street. Well, the lesson here is that white people understand that speaking their language, learning their religion, and all these different things keeps us in the trauma trance, keeps us unstable, keeps us at risk for whatever they come up with to keep us at each other's throats and not committed to each other. One of the most difficult things you can do, and I've tried it on national television, is get black people to have a conversation about black men. I was on Roland Martin's show, and I'm going to end this tangent in a moment by saying this. I was on Roland Martin's show, and there was a sister on there talking about black women vote, and black women magic, and black women fly, and black women swim, all the things that black women are doing. And I said, that's really great that black women do all these things. I support it. And I'm real clear enough about what women go through and have gone through in terms of oppression and systemic level disenfranchised to understand that there should be a remedy to that. However, black men have been going through a few things too. So instead of just having magic. Talk about your sons and your husbands and your fathers and acknowledge what they're going through too, so we can have some mending here. I know y'all loving the magic. I said, so let's have a conversation. The black women's magic. I said, so let's have a conversation about black men. There was a black man in the room too on the panel, and the room got quiet on TV. And then Roland came in, and on TV you can't have no white noise, which is what it was. You can't have no white noise on TV. So he jumped in because nobody could say anything, because we don't know how to have conversations that are fair, neutral, nurturing, or even supportive of black men as a people. We don't know how to do it. And that's very, very dangerous. And we need to learn how to do it.
Right. And we pick that up from white culture, because we got to remember when the first capitalistic system is slavery, American chattel slavery. The first capitalist, Google it. You can find this out. And that was built on the backs of black men. And there were more black let me correct myself. African men who were enslaved. There were more men brought over here than women initially, until slavery, the importing of slavery slowed down and then ultimately stopped in 1808. Then there was more of we need to get more women here. But there were women who came over as well, but mostly black men. And then what happened after that? We had breeding farms where they literally conditioned us to be the types of people that we are today. And black men's original function was physicality and sexuality. What we can do with our phalluses and what we can do with our muscle mass was the main focus for black people. And that functionality in this society has never left. And at this point in time, black women have been cultivated to believe into that racist anti-black stereotype about us, to the point where their black women and their black girl magic is opposed to black male existence. And that is important for us to understand, that and we will champion that, because we've been conditioned to champion black women, uplift their voices. Ain't nobody amplified a black woman's voice like black men have over time. Have we done bad things? Absolutely. Have we been non-constructive? Absolutely. But at the end of the day, we've always been together as a community up until about recently, where we're starting to see this divide happen even worse. And when we have, I'm not even going to say Kamala Harris, because there's questions if she's really a black woman. But when we have folks who represent those visuals, and it's the optic things that these are black women in power, what does that do to black men? What does that say? Because the narratives that I'm starting to hear from black women is that the black community is absent of black men. And they only care about us when we have a partner that is non-black. And then we get the attention that they want.
Go ahead.
There's a part of Brandon's narrative that I want to bring in that I think is important. And I almost brought it up earlier, but I distracted myself and I didn't illuminate on it. And I get emotional when I talk about this, so I'm going to try to keep it hang in there, because this is on video. A lot of black men are wounded and have broken hearts and have inherited the generational unresolved broken heartness of other males. And to give some contemporary context in the United States, I'm going to go to Azania, where I went in early 2000 to do some work, some post-apartheid work. After apartheid, and this is relevant to this country, which is why I'm mentioning it. After apartheid was dismantled visually, because it's still in place in some ways, there was an uptick in domestic violence and violence toward children in black households or African households. And one of the things I went over there to work with this group called Sister Song to do was address the issue of domestic violence, particularly from male to female. And what I realized then, and what's happening and not addressed here, is that those black men who dealt with the brunt of dehumanization, being called boys from until 80 and 90 years old if they lived that long, and living in a patriarchal context which values manhood, like this one we live in this country, where they never got the chance to quote unquote be men in a society that was patriarchal, that nobody was resisting enough for it to be unstable. Everybody was in this patriarchal context, and men did not have the opportunity to be that. So there was a perpetual state of humiliation, and it encouraged lack of problem solving between black people. For example, you might have seen the film The Help. Remember the film The Help? I bring that up because in that film, one of the things that it showed was how Black women spent their whole day taking care of white kids. By the time they got home, they were shooing their kids away because they were exhausted. That exhaustion that we feel, that we're not being used to taking care of ourselves and not being used to even engaging Black male trauma and Black male paralysis and misdirected rage. That's part of what Black women are mad at Black men for acting out without creating any context for resolution around that pain that Black men are dealing with, which is creating maybe the violence that you saw, Brandon, in terms of domestic violence. It definitely was informed the domestic violence that I saw, but my father figure not knowing how to do nothing with his emotions, functional, but act out and be brutal, because then he got a chance to fake like a man, because being a man is to perfect your brutality skills, your violence skills, because that's what was done to us. So part of how we're going to resolve this, and the work I did in Lasagna, was shock the Black women. I mean, I never forget a lot of the African women, when I would talk about their husbands and his rage that he never articulated in their presence, he would start crying. Just like when I talk about the murder of Black men, and I ask parents in front of their little boys, have they talked about police brutality to their boys and created space for them to engage that phenomena because they actually have witnessed it, and then they started crying. There's a lot of Black male fear, terror, and misdirected rage and pain that we're living with that has caused us to have behavior that we're judged for, that has never been systemically engaged in ways to resolve it. So when we do all this Black girl magic and stuff like that, which I'm down with, I just want some boy magic up in there somewhere, not given by white folks, because white folks is the one making y'all magical. You know, y'all got y'all flying carpets from white folks, because they know that if we keep them competing with each other and give gifts to one of them and not talk about the other, because like you said, Callie, I mean, the mass majority of Black men voted for Biden and Obama. That's what I call Obama. They voted for that person because that's what Black people do. The same thing Black women do. They vote for the Democratic Party. But as you said, which is a systemic part of creating a splinter, is that Black men are bad. Black men are bad. And y'all got magic. So I raise all that because, in my opinion, and I don't want to be on nobody's show, including yours, just running my mouth, we have to look at the layers of phenomena that are perpetually unresolved, generation of generation, that keeps us only having symbolic successes instead of transformational and material successes that make a difference for the people to come. I mean, we were all excited when Stevie Wonder sung at the White House when Obama was there, instead of holding him accountable like white gays and Latinos did. And the white gays and Latinos got fruit out of holding them accountable. Same-sex marriage and blah, blah, blah. But we were busy clapping for Gladys Knight. You know, symbolic stuff, because we don't love ourselves enough to demand something that's actually concrete. And the lack of self-love is based on the myth of our inferiority. When we realize it's a myth, because it's a myth, ain't it, Brandon?
Yes, it is. I just said bingo. You couldn't hear me, but I'm like, that's it. It is a myth. Yeah.
Black people got it going on. You know, we independently got it going on, and I can prove it. I got the receipts. That's not the name of this show, Black Receipts, but I got them, and you all have them. You all represent some of those darn receipts. I mean, right. Brandon, what he has achieved as a brother, despite what he's gone through, is receipts.
Right.
And it's a few of us, but so we gotta. You know, I don't want to just talk. I hate to come off however I'm coming off, but I lived for change. You know what I'm saying? I have strategies and technologies to actually get us out of the anti-Black white supremacy trauma trance, so we can so we can be awake toward actual change and be able to decode white supremacist norms that are being mistaken as Black cultural dysfunction.
Right.
We got to get out of this, or else we just talking.
Yeah. Functionality is necessary.
No, and everything that you have brought up, and you know, is important to the dialogue this evening. And I think one thing that you had said, as far as moving from just these symbolic victories, and that's one reason why I did include in the title about moving from symbolism to power. And I wanted to get your thoughts, because we are going to talk about the trauma trance. We are going to go into that. And before we do that, I just wanted to get your thoughts on this whole moving from symbolism to power. When we saw, what Ice Cube did, people can argue, we can have that discussion all day, but some could consider that a power move of creating a document and saying that this is something for our community and not backing down from it. So I'm sure that many people saw when he went on, I think it's Cocktails with the Queens or something. That's with like Fox and on. Yes. Yeah. And so I thought it was interesting when he I think it was with Vivica Fox, where he said that he created this document for the Black community. And she said I think I'm paraphrasing a little bit. She said, well, what about Black women? And he's like, well, aren't Black women a part of the Black community? And she's like, well, we need something specifically for Black women. So I also want to talk about when we are looking to do a power move, especially Black men looking to do a power move, the response that we're seeing. And he got flack not just from that show. Many Black women who are in mainstream media, really not kind of acknowledging the work that he was doing. So I do want to get into the trauma trance, and I think this could be a lead into that conversation. But I also want to talk to you, or for you guys to share with us a little bit about that power move. Black man makes a power move, and the response that he's getting. Like, I don't know. I was telling Brandon in another conversation, I said, I'm not sure when Black women left the Black community, but it seems like somehow there's this separation of them even being in the community. So if you can talk to that, please.
Well, it's not an issue of Black men having left the Black community. The issue is that and I didn't see the show y'all talking about, so I haven't seen it, but I know about the sentiment. The issue was that Vivica has bought the Kool-Aid of, if a Black man is talking, we should be suspect. If a Black man is talking, we're in danger. We're not being protected. We're not being covered if a Black man is talking. And if she wasn't so busy drinking the Kool-Aid, she would have realized that when we say Black, we're talking about Black everybody. I mean, I remember when there was this ironic push to marginalize Ice Cube as somebody who was bad, in contrast to who I call Obama. Mm-hmm. And Obama got a white husband, literally taking care of white children, and that's her family. And Ice Cube marrying a sister, and got Black children. So his life paints a picture of somebody who cares and loves Black women. But if you can't humanize the Black male image and look at it as being suspect, or something's missing, because I go through this all the time. Brandon can speak for himself. I don't know what he goes through, but I know as a dark-skinned Black man with a relatively low voice who is not a white accommodationist, I'm constantly being abused by Black people for not being, for being too Black.
Right.
All the time. And I remember, and I'll make this short, I promise, I spoke at Hofstra, some school in Long Island, New York. I went there to speak to the Black faculty about using the academic experience of Black students there to make them learn how to be committed and loyal to Black progress, instead of generic academics who are writing journals for social support and academic acumen so they can look good for white folks. But to do what Asians and Jews and everybody else doing, what we used to do, is use this to broaden your toolkit to come on back and be with Black people. And this woman got up and she had on, I'm gonna sound like I'm being stereotyping, but I'm telling the truth. She had on pink, triangle rainbow flag earrings. She had on a lesbian outfit. I mean, that's what I'm just gonna call.
She had the uniform on.
Yeah, she had the uniform on. And she was a Black woman. And she got up and she said, "This is interesting what you're saying, and this is nice and everything, but you left out somebody." And I said, "Who?" Now I knew, because I've been alive a few minutes, what she was doing and where she was coming from. I knew what she was doing. I said, "So who did I leave out?" "Well, you left out the LBGTXYZ NOP movement." And I said, "Well, you're Black and I'm Black." Now, one thing that people always assume about me is that I'm a heterosexual Black man. That's what they assume, and they assume I'm one of these heterosexual monsters who gonna come in and do whatever y'all heterosexual monsters do. Anyway. So I said to her, I said, "Well, last I looked, people that look like you are Black." And I'm talking to black people, and that includes you. She got very defensive. She said, well, transgender, this is how they divide us. That's why I'm bringing the story up, because it happened. Well, just black transgendered women are being killed every day, and every day there's another murder. And this was like the 200th day of the year. And I said, okay, well, let's look at our calculators and let's look at the stats on so-called transgender women being killed. It was 18 at that time. 600 black women had been killed, and over 1,000 black men had been killed. I said, so sister, I'm going to respect you because we're all academics in this room, but I think you need to understand that if transgender people are being killed every day, it should be more than 18. So you're involved in this white people promoted it pretend epidemic and walking over the epidemic of black male death, which is way over 18, and black women's death who are born women, that's way over 18. You're being caught up. You're inside of an agenda that is not even properly informed to attack me, and you're trying to make me bad because I'm a man. I never left you out. But as soon as I saw you, I said, there's my sister over there. And I couldn't wait to connect with you, and because you're my sister. So stop making the assumption that because I'm a black man in the room that I am your enemy. You are being played, and you have a PhD, so your doctor played. You are being played, sister. And she sit her butt down.
In the uniform.
Well, she's gonna take it off, especially for me.
Anyway, oh no. She gonna add another level to it when you come back. But you bring up a good point, because you're in academia, I'm in academia, and it gets worse the higher you go. I mean, it gets very scary the higher you go. And these are the folks who are leading the narratives. We don't think of that because they're not always on television. Yes. But those producers of the shows get that information from mostly white papers, because nobody reads academic journals except for academics who want to criticize each other. They get that information, they leak it to media, and then that's how it gets into the national and the public dialogue. But people don't know that when they're not in academia. But a lot of this man hatred comes from that.
That's right.
And we don't know that, but there's fuel thrown on the fire based on how things show up in the community. So it just proves like the already false ideal of who black men and how black men are. It just fuels it when we do have domestic violence issues, or when we get in arguments, or we leave our families and abandon our families. It just makes these things reality, when really it was a few people who were doing those things initially, but they became popular to do those things through media, music, art, dance. Think about some of the Pulitzer Prize winning black plays and books. A lot of them are very anti-male. If black men, a lot of them are, but we don't think of it like that because we want to what? We want to uplift those voices. But when we're uplifting voices that don't include black men, you're not talking about the black community. And that's my fear that we're at right now. In order for that to work, it's something that I call the black man boxes. Black men are only acceptable in particular forms and structures. So we are acceptable when we are performing on athletic fields and courts. We are acceptable when we are showing up in space as demasculinized men. And that doesn't mean that we're homosexual or same gender loving or anything. That just means that we don't have masculine characteristics. We are acceptable when we are immature and silly. So Kevin Hart's and folks who want to make jokes. And we are acceptable when we're silent. And that's really the aim, is to shut us up and to have us stop talking. So when Ice Cube shows up on that show, already with the deck stacked against him, and he's trying to do something for all of us. And then Vivica Fox says, what about black women? Well, he said, aren't black women in the black community? What she said, Kai, if you go back and listen, she said no. And then she said, hold up. She went into the sister girl act real quick, but she slipped. She said no. What do you mean black women aren't part of the community? And that's where Ice Cube went. And then the conversation kind of veered off a little bit and got more into black men versus black women. At some point in time, sisters have to wake up that they have been played by the establishment. On an academic level, is some of the worst stuff. You can't even go into academic circles as a black man and even really speak truth. You have to compromise yourself to maintain a job, to get through campus and navigate that, to get your degree. to get into the workforce, to be a part of these social groups and clubs, you can't be an affirming Black man just in your own self, because you will get shot down. And that's unfortunate that we have this that has been constructed, but that's what we're seeing all across this nation.
Well, one thing I hope that we talk about before it's over is the things that we're doing to resolve the issue. I want to get to the trauma trance, but I want to make sure that we don't do it, what happens most of the time, that we have a 2-hour show and 90 minutes of it is what's wrong with us. And then we have 15 minutes to talk about what we can do. And I'm going to just slip in before we get to the trauma trance part, because it's ironic what I go through when I do this. I say to Black women, I said, first of all, it's not always the case, but it's the case enough for you to consider what I'm going to suggest. You raise Black boys. You're in the driver's seat often in terms of how Black boys will turn out. But can't no black man, what's the cliche? Can't no woman raise no Black man. I said, well, they already are men by nature, so you don't have to worry about that. Penises, they already are male. So just come up with character, critical analysis, the capacity to decode the society we live in, be honest about the fact that this is a white supremacist, corrupt culture, and that it's problematic, not you. There's nothing wrong with you. And there's going to be implications if something's wrong with you because of how corrupt the society is. And I want you, baby, to see through it. And don't give them this line about you got to work twice as good as a white man to make it, without letting them know, because white people are twice as corrupt. They forget that part. So what it looks like is that we have to make up for being Black twice if the narrative is not complete, based on what I'm suggesting. And at my organization, we have a strategy called Black Leadership Through Parenting. And we teach Black parents how to be intentional parents, how to practice what I call CTCA, which is critical thinking and culture affirmation, and how to make sure that when you sit them in front of the television as your babysitter because you need a break, that they see what's going on and they notice the corruption. Because if they don't notice the corruption, they're going to think they're the problem. So all that to say was that we have solutions here. If a lot of boys are being raised by Black mothers can condition them to have decency literacy, to have literacy around respecting women, can have literacy around respecting themselves. They are in the driver's seat to do that, instead of just whining about what's wrong with Black men all around them all day and creating some more confused Black men who are going to be set up to act out emotionally and be blamed for it and then be battered and keep the cycle going. There's solutions here, aren't there, Brandon? Aren't there solutions here?
Absolutely.
And I want us to, before we finish, to get into that, because when we hear about Black people being in academia, as Brandon mentioned, and how that's a cesspool of anti-Blackness, we can get to our children before they even get to junior high school.
Bingo.
Before they even get to elementary school, we can get them ready. I mean, Jews go to Jew school. Asians go to Asian school.
Right.
And they're trying to make all our schools white gay schools in terms of putting LGBT stuff in Head Start and also stuff that white folks are doing that they think I'm involved in because I'm SGL and I have nothing to do with it, and I don't even support it. But the point I'm making is that we have to stop being crazy and be rational.
Right. Absolutely.
Because we're not going to help each other if we stay crazy. And it's crazy to blame the children of Black women who are male for Black male dysfunction when a woman raised them.
Right.
That don't make no sense.
Right. Absolutely.
We need some Black parent magic, sisters. Y'all run up, jumping them down with this Black women vote, Black women jump high, Black people breathe in and out. Well, we need some Black parent magic.
Absolutely.
Magic. I'm in a solution, Jumbo.
Yeah, and we're going to definitely jump into talk more about breaking the trauma trance to unpack that. What does that mean? Before we do that, Brandon, was there something that you wanted to add?
Yeah, since we're talking solutions, I think that there's a few strategies that I would add. And Cleo goes right to where I go, is we have to look at how we are rearing, quote unquote, our children. I mean, we can't complain about how Black men are and not take any accountability on how they got there. And it's not just all the system. It's us too, because guess what? The system is not going to force me to not be a part of my child's life. The system's not going to force me not to engage in my child's education. The system's not going to force me to not sit down and have a conversation with my child about the things they're not doing correctly, and then yell at them and pop them upside the head and tell them to go sit their ass down somewhere. The system ain't doing that. Those are my choices. Now, I may have stressors from the system that are leading to some of that, but I have to have the accountability as a parent to build my capacity and skills to attend to my child and make sure that I'm doing everything that I can to make sure that their life is the best that it can be. Because once they get out there, they're out there. There ain't nothing but traps for them. So we have to take accountability and agency for raising our children, especially our Black boys. I don't have sons at the moment. I might have some before it's all over, but at the moment I'm not. So my sons are the community. Any Black boy that I come in contact with, I see as my child. Now, I might not talk to them like they're my child, but I will role model behaviors like they're my child. I will mentor and offer apprenticeships to show them how to do things like they're my child. I will also not adultify them and allow them to be boys, because unfortunately, so many Black boys aren't allowed to be boys. They can't make mistakes. They can't build things in the house and destruct things. They can't rumble and do, some roughhouse play, because what are they told? Go sit your little bad butt down. Go sit your little black butt down. They can't question things. Men oppose environments naturally. So when boys are asking questions and trying to use ingenuity and figure things out, and we're told to stay out of grown folks' business, children are supposed to be seen and not heard, you're killing the curiosity of a mind that could really change the world. But what ends up happening is we condition Black boys to just shut up, use your bodies and not your brains. And that's unfortunate. And we do that all the time. And the other thing that I think that we definitely need to do, and when we get into strategies a little bit more, we can talk about what this looks like, is we need to help Black boys develop a vision. Man, from counseling to mentoring to just doing programming. I mean, so many Black boys that have fantasies and they're betting on hope. And they want the Ferrari and the Lambo and the foreign chick, and they want the seven figures. They want all that stuff. But guess what? They don't realize that they can make all that stuff happen. They're waiting for a lottery ticket or something to get those things, because their minds haven't been developed for those things. That if those are the things that they want, they can achieve so much more than that, but their vision is so limited. So they get stuck in a box that is socially acceptable and then paraded and championed by our media. But we need to help craft a vision for our children to do something and actually see their place in this world and have a successful and a positive impact in the world. Black boys only see a negative impact of what they do, right? When we do something bad, that's the only time our voices are uplifted and amplified, is the wrong that we do. But when we do something right, like write a plan to try to change the economic dynamics of our community, we get shot down for it, because Black men aren't supposed to be intellectuals. We're supposed to be sexual prowess beings, and we're supposed to be physical beings when necessary.
When we justifiably critique Black dysfunctional behaviors, such as Brandon just described, simultaneously, and this is a strategy, it's very important that we put that dysfunctional behavior in context. It's also very important that we simultaneously illuminate examples of Black functionality that have happened in this culture that have been disrupted, and that there is a disruptor. It's also important that we understand, while we're talking about the disruptor, that we also are equipped in the modern era to deflect that disruptor and to protect ourselves from that disruptor in ways that we couldn't do before. We're equipped to protect ourselves, but until then, there's a reason why we do the things that we do that's Black embodied, that looks like a Black negative phenomena. But everything you just described, Brandon, is a direct consequence of white supremacy mythology and systemic anti-Blackness, and a strategy to get us to implode and be dysfunctional and be easier to criminalize and be written off on the way to jail, like he must have done something wrong. These are the outcomes of specific agendas that are attracted to us. For example, when you hear about or see anything on television or in the media, well, I'll give you an example. For example, right now, and this happened during the dawning days of Obama's administration, all Black voices that had any kind of relative independence in the media landscape were erased, all gotten rid of. And Joy Reid is cool and everything, but Joy Reid is not a person who is the inheritor of the anxiety and energy of slavery in this country. She has a whole nother cultural context, which white people are more comfortable with and have less anxiety about their being self-conscious in her presence, because she don't have that same whip and chain chattel slavery history that we have. So they keep on moving things around for them. And we think that Joy Reid is some great black thing when they got rid of Harris Perry and on the same network and Tavis. So we know we have to understand that we are on the chessboard, as Dr. Frances Cress Welsing would say, who's my hero. So I got to get the name right. Dr. Frances Cress Welsing. She said that our lives are on a chessboard, but we're not playing chess. We're playing checkers. So in closing of that particular passage, as a norm, when we talk about Black dysfunction, I'm being redundant on purpose, we have to put it in context. Because as you already know, Brandon, and both of you know, that Black dysfunction is not genetic. Black dysfunction is not based on the state of being Black. Black dysfunction is a consequence, for example, when they built Black Wall Street and Allensworth and Rosewood and all these other things they built. And white people said, no, we're going to murder, kill, and slice because we can't have this. This is too much of a great contradiction to the myth of our superiority, just like Trump became president. Because even though Obama was very problematic, he symbolically contradicted the allegation that we were inferior. And his beautiful wife contradicted the allegation. So they said, we got to get the most craziest white whatever to make up for that. So they're constantly playing chess all the time. So we have to, all this I'm saying is that the majority of Black dysfunction is not the result of Black genetics. It's a result of unresolved trauma. I mean, it took Ida B. Wells, a Black woman. This is so important because we don't realize this. It took Black men were in the ones that lived who didn't get drawn and quartered and murdered and sliced in public, were horrified and scared and felt hopeless regarding the resolution of random lynchings. So they were too traumatized and terrorized to take care of themselves. So Ida B., who was not going through that experience, was able to go and stop and slow down the lynchings of Black people, particularly Black men in this country, because she understood the terror and horror that we're forgetting about today by blaming Black men for acting out, by blaming, like I had a very abusive father, and I don't want to get into the story about my father, but I know, I get it now why he did what he did. I was able to be in his life long enough for him to transform out of that anger due to my facilitation, because I got it, why he did what he did. He wasn't just a monster. He was a unresolved, brutalized man in great pain who had no place in this culture to actually even articulate that and resolve that. So he was a brutal, violent asshole instead, and tried to control my mother because that's all he had for us. He was concerned, and he wanted to control her very life. Now, I'm not, obviously, I think it's clear to you that I'm not advocating and supporting that dysfunctional behavior. I'm saying it has a context, and you cannot resolve nothing without addressing the context. Even when you complain about it, when it comes to Black folks, you got to put the behavior that we don't like in context, because there's great examples of Black father majesty, of Black father doing great things for their children and loving them and nurturing them. There's great examples of Black men who are being loving husbands, loving partners. They exist, but they don't get no play. Now, this is the show This Is Us. You guys ever seen This Is Us? The show This Is Us?
I'm familiar with it. Yeah, I'm familiar with it.
Well, I'm going to close with this because I want y'all to see how white supremacy works, because I had somebody tell me the other day that I should praise the show. I said, no, I'm not going to praise the show where the functional Black father was created by white parents.
Right.
Who were saved, who they saved from a dead drug addicted mother and a father who died of AIDS. All fiction.
Yeah, right.
It's all made up for white people to come out better, and Black people who look functionality. It is not a self-contained Black phenomena. Those white parents did a good job.
Right.
It's fiction, y'all. Yeah. I know y'all know that, but I'm talking to your audience. That y'all, it's fiction, white contrived fiction that perpetuates anti-Blackness and a mythical white savior mantra, which is ironic as hell because whiteness is evil. I didn't say white people and everybody white. That's another show. I'm saying that whiteness is evil, and whiteness was created to counter Black survival.
Right.
And Black is also a construct. They're both constructs.
Exactly.
And if we don't put it all in context and tell our children that all the stuff is construct, it's going to default into them thinking they're problematic, and we're going to keep acting out on each other, being domestic violators, whether it's in relationships or at home or in the streets.
Right.
And we're going to implode. And Obama, who y'all call Kamala, she's a big insult. But that's another show.
Mm-hmm.
But she's very problematic.
Mm-hmm.
Her and her white first lady, well, first man, whatever he is, right? first gentleman, or whatever he is. That's a problem. Symbolically, that's the problem.
Yeah.
Well, if you find the information that's being provided tonight, if you're finding it helpful, and just enjoying the dialogue that we're having tonight, please make sure you give this video a thumbs up. Please share, and please also subscribe to the channel. It helps to continue this type of content that is needed in our community. I do want to go into again, talking about how do we begin to break the trauma trance. Cleo, you had mentioned the critical thinking and cultural affirmation methodology. Can you talk a little bit about that? And then, Brandon, we can turn it back over to you to add to that point.
Okay, I'll summarize because I've been very verbose. Y'all got me started. It's my perspective that Black people, as I said earlier, are in a trauma trance. That living in a society that contradicts our humanity from a linguistic perspective, meaning language, from a media perspective, from a political perspective, from all angles, the implications that being Black is bad. One of the things I use in my research to back up my perspective is the doll test that you've all heard about. And from the 1930s up into the 2000s, even up into Obama's administration, they were doing that test, and Black children keep picking the white doll, the majority of them as being good, the white doll as being good and wonderful and having these great qualities, and the Black doll as being bad. And these are adorable Black children. And so the phenomena that leads to this problematic doll choice has not been resolved clearly based on the science. So I'm clear why that's the case, because we have been getting involved through capitalism and material gains and assimilation and trying to perfect whiteness in the Black body, instead of reclaiming the Black body as a place that needs to be repaired and needs to be nurtured and resolved in terms of the implications that are in the very language that we speak. I mean, the term little white lies is a problematic term because it has unconscious implications that are not articulated. But trust me, it's having an impact on the subconscious. So the CTC, or critical thinking and cultural affirmation model, in short, it has all of these activities, strategies, and different types of things that it does to get the people who are involved, who are always Black, to unpack their perspective, to unpack how they feel the way they feel, and why they see things the way they see things, and why the Black child is choosing the white doll. What's going on? And an abbreviated perspective, because it's a long, drawn-out discussion because of all the elements of CTCA. The bottom line is that we trigger Black people into being critical thinkers and becoming awake, becoming mindful of the trauma trance, not because we tell them they're in the trauma trance. We have proof that through their own deconstruction of their own lives, their own inability to know of anybody Black who's done something positive from a historical perspective, or even in their personal lives. The anti-Blackness is unearthed and becomes better for us to actually engage and understand that this is happening in our subconscious. And then we look at why we have a white supremacist mindset. And then we do work that's emotional, that's based in so-called psychology and so-called mental health, but from more of a Wellsing perspective than Freud or Jung. And then we talk about how we're going to replace a dysfunctional self-concept with an exemplary Black self-concept using real facts about Blackness. But before we get into the intellectual talk about all the great things we've done, which we do every February, we're in that month right now, we unpack why we aren't even naturally embracing and knowledgeable of Black genius and Black capacity from Africa up on here. We deconstruct why you don't know this. You 40 years old, you 30 years old, you're 20 years old. You know about Maria Antoinette and all these other folks that you don't know about Kabaka Mwanga. Why? The unconscious answer is because we're Black and we're N-words and we don't deserve. That's if it's African, it's not that important because you know NAS. And I think I heard Brandon talk about NAS in the previous show, but I've been talking about NAS since the 90s. It's part of my curriculum. It stands for N-words ain't doo-doo, but I don't want to cuss on your show. But you know, it rhymes with hit. But it's literally a part of my curriculum that's called the NAS phenomenon. And we deconstruct the word. We telling people to sit their Black ass down and why nobody else says sit your Latino ass down, sit your white ass down. We talk about how we learned to racialize ourselves as a human group called Black. And we talk about Black asses and Black MFs, we're racializing ourselves from a white supremacist frame of reference that has made us not human, but a thing, a race. And why that's problematic. And why we normalize that, and why we have a white person taking up shop in our psyche that we have not evicted, because we've learned to value that white man instead of Blackness. Why grown folks could be in a room together to complain about what racism and whisper the word white. I'm sure y'all seen that. I know this. Wait, we all Black at your house. The door is locked. Why are you whispering? But you know what I'm saying? You laughing, but this happens. So we unpack all of that, and then once we get the juices flowing around. The different attacks on Black common sense, Black self-evaluative self-respect. Then we go into the critical analysis piece and fill it in with Black excellence and deconstruct the contradiction of anti-Blackness in the face of pro-Black realities that we learn to quickly dismiss and how to not dismiss that. Part of the Black parenting, Black Leadership Through Parenting project is part of the CTCA methodology, teaching Black parents to become intentional parents instead of passive parents who love their children, but who are not preparing them to love themselves in a white supremacist society. So it's full of strategies that one day I'm willing to do, a workshop on. But the bottom line is that we are in a trauma trance. My work is centered around breaking the trauma trance with exercises, activities, workshops, and things to get people to unpack this trauma trance and admit that it's there or that it impacts their lives and to do the work. Like I said earlier, you can't do the work if you're not looking at the issues that we are facing and that we've internalized generationally, or else it's just talk. I mean, we all have high-level cognitive intellectual capacity all through our community, but we don't have self-love and cultural health or self-conceptual health capacity in too many cases because that's been interrupted on purpose. Obama is a strategy. I predicted that she was going to be the one. I predicted she was going to be the presidential nominee, and I was incorrect. But I saved myself by saying, or vice president. That's on the same day, because she is who white folks chose as the most, now that they were politically put into a corner because of Black girl magic and Black girl politics of having to pick a Black woman. He had the perfect Black woman, in quotes, because she ain't even had fully Black. She's talking about Asian pride recently. They found the perfect person to put in there for white comfort. And she literally loves white people at home and at work. So, she's the perfect person. But I'm gonna close this rant by saying we have to understand what's going on here. We got to understand why they chose her to be the so-called vice president as opposed to those other people, other Black women that they could have chose. We got to teach our children what's going on. We got to teach them CTCA.
Brandon, would you like to add to that, unpacking the trauma trance and what you do when you're doing work in the community to start to have members of our community understand exactly the system that we're in?
Absolutely. And I think CTCA is a great strategy to really help us undo what we do, what has been done to us. And, for us to take it on a more philosophical route, Black folks have taken on another culture's ethos. And for folks who have no idea what an ethos is guiding beliefs and ideals that characterize a community, nation, or ideology, and is used to influence our emotions, our behaviors, and even our morals through things like music, movies, TV shows, radio, things of that nature. And we bought into the white supremacy ethos, and we almost do it better than white supremacists from time to time. When white folks stopped lynching us in mass publicly, they found other ways, other forms of propaganda for us to continue to lynch ourselves, whether that was through alcohol and drugs, criminal activity, so they can lock us up and create other industries, to even to the point now where we can't even have constructive dialogue amongst black men and black women because we've ate up so much of that hatred of one another from them. So the ethos of us needs to be worked on, and that's what Cleo's doing in his work, and I attempt to do in mine. Now, my work is typically more on an individual basis because that's how people, get in contact with me. So what I do is I help folks understand not just how white supremacy has affected them, but also what has their journey been. So many black folks, we have had our kind of collective memories wiped clean due to our trauma. We don't even understand where our families come from. Right. One of the saddest things, man, and this hurt me for real. Like, this is one of the reasons why I got burnt out doing therapy 9 to 5 and I had to take a step back, was there's an exercise called a genogram. And what a genogram is essentially is a family tree. So, around in the early on when you're working with a client, you ask to do this genogram. So it starts with them, then their siblings, then their parents and all that. And when I had non-black clients, which was rare, but I did have some, I was able to go 3, 4, 5 generations on that genogram. But I've probably seen about 2,000, anywhere between 1,600 and 2,000 black people as clients in my time doing therapy. And I am confident to say about 95% of those folks could not go beyond their grandparents.
Yep.
That is trauma. When you don't know where you come from, it's hard for you to develop an identity or even a vision for your future on something constructive because you are literally lost. All we know is what we're given. And so what I try to do is help people, one, connect back to what they know. And if that's all you know, that's fine. It's not fine, but we'll work with what you know. Understand who those people are and how you got to where you're at, because that's what I call adaptive awareness. So now that you know, what you're going to do about it, which goes into the next step, which is balance and boundaries. So balance is all about, having time, balancing your time and energy, balancing what you do for yourself and what you do for other people, balancing your accountability and your compassion. Like, there's balance in life that you must have. So many of us are off balance because of expectations of what society wants us to do or other people. And usually when other people want us to do stuff, it's in their best interest, not in ours. So it's really reclaiming yourself is by getting balance. And that's why, Kai, I know you're into yoga. Yoga gives you physical balance, which helps you have mental balance so that you can do the things that you need to do. But the other B in balance is boundaries, which black folks, we think we got good boundaries because we can tell somebody off, but that's not where boundaries stop. Like, saying no is only one element of boundaries. Boundaries are expectations for how you want to be treated and how you treat yourself. And many of us don't know what our boundaries are until somebody crosses them, and now we want to go upside their head or cuss them out. But see, it's too late at that point because you should be able to develop what your boundaries are. And then the next thing that I try to do that's similar to what Cleo's doing in his work is what I call consistent, constructive choices. Making sure the functionality, the things you do are consistent, keep doing them, especially when they work for you, and that they're constructive. Are they causing any harm to you or anyone else? That's hard for people to do because they can't get past the A. They can't get past the adaptive awareness piece because it's usually too painful, or we don't want to keep it real with ourselves. As black folks, we are very good at looking out the window and not looking in the mirror. We have to look in the mirror and just say, this is what has been given to me. This is where I'm at, and I know where I want to go.
And that's why I call it a trance, Brandon, because we're avoiding because we, on an unconscious basis, feel like it's too scary or it's going to be too painful to see things for as they are. And we question our value as Black people to even go there. So let's just adapt. And we are in a trance. There was a young lady, I didn't watch the inauguration. I was not interested in Biden Obama's inauguration, but I heard about this young lady who spoke and talked about the founding fathers. Did you guys hear about that? this goes back to what you said, Brandon, regarding how our frame of reference is their ethos. She calling people that rape people who look like her every day for lunch and breakfast the founding fathers.
Right.
And she's sitting there, a gorgeous, beautiful black woman in African locks, talking this stuff on the world stage at Obama and Kamala's inauguration. And of course, now she's a superstar because they know that they got her. They know she just called us, our people who murdered and killed her people, founding fathers. Let's give her a gig. Let her be a model. Let her be a spokesperson. Let's feed and reward this anti-black white accommodation is insanity. Well, you cannot step out of white accommodation insanity if you're in a trance and you're not in problem-solving mode. You know, if you are not even, I ask grown people all the time why they do certain things, and they go into a catatonic stage. They can't answer it. Because I said so. I mean, that's sometimes why black children here, because I said so, because apparently they don't have a critical analysis of what they just did. Big Mama did it. You know what I'm saying? So again, we got to come out the trance, because no matter how much wonderful advice you give someone who's deep in a trance, they might pick it up intellectually, but they're going to relapse behaviorally back into white supremacist norms if they don't become offended by anti-blackness. We're not offended by anti-blackness. We're not offended by behavior and messaging in the media and in our community. That's an insult to being a human being. When you hear NAS, when I have my classes, I ask my class sometimes who are up in the hundreds, have you ever heard NAS? And I actually articulate, what that means in the class. And everybody raised their hand.
Everybody.
And I said, how many of you have just said it? And they look around each other and they don't know whether to confess. And I say, don't confess. Yeah. You know what I'm talking about. I'm not trying to shame you. I'm trying to crystallize a post-slavery, anti-black, acculturated norm that's poison that we have the solution to not do. I said, I'm sitting up here. I don't use it. It's not part of my anger. It's not part of my rage. I don't default to the word. I'm just like the people in lasagna who don't call themselves kafirs. And most of the people in the class never heard the word kafir. But if any of you are familiar with the word kafir, it's the Danish equivalent of the N-word that they used to call the people a lasagna. And because the Azanians had indigenous languages still and indigenous cultural norms still, that would gave them a filter and a capacity to deduce, we ain't gonna be no kafirs, not at home. You're not gonna hear no song in South Africa saying, live your best life. I ain't going back and forth with those kafirs.
Right.
The equivalent in the United States with the N-word was on the radio in the top 10. I know what I'm talking about. Right. A guy had a song called I'm living my best life. I'm not going. I said, how come there's not a song called I'm not going back and forth with those faggots? I'm not going back and forth with those kikes. I'm not going back and forth with those kinks and those wetbacks, because they have not been domesticated. And it ain't your fault that you were domesticated, black people. It was the result of a corruption that you have to learn to disengage from, so we can stop falling for the okie doke. Absolutely. And we have a conversation about the okie doke too, because we fallen for left and right, and there's cause and effect. And a lot of my work is built on cause and effect to a high degree, because we have to, as I said earlier, we have to put our dysfunctions and what we do and don't do in context, and contrast it with the fact that we have had successes as a people, even in the United States.
Right.
We've had commerce in metropolises and cities, and built bus lines and communities and banks and hospitals, blah, blah, blah. We're very, very successful. But somebody didn't like it. And those somebody who don't like it, y'all, are white inferiorists. I don't call them white supremacists. I think they have an inferiority complex.
Absolutely.
And when you put it in context as an inferiorist, as a supremacist, it totally changes the energy of what's going on here. You understand what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
This is an inferiority complex that white people have systematically made into something to defend themselves. And like Brandon said, we're caught up in their defense and their white supremacy defense neuroses.
Right.
Where we're becoming white supremacy defense neuroses by being anti-black.
Right. Yeah.
By
and we
saying
need
NAS.
Yes. And us saying NAS is the same thing that they do. They flip their inferiority for their empowerment. We try to do the same thing without power. So we get caught in the trance and stuck and continue the anti-Black disenfranchisement of us as a people. And we're at a point in time with this system where the insults are so refined that we don't even realize they're insults. We think that it's all good. We think it's funny. Let me give you two examples. We started with politics. Let's close it out with two examples. 2015, Hillary Clinton gets on one of the Black people's favorite shows, The Breakfast Club. And she says she's got hot sauce in her bag. Now, that was an insult, yes, but we didn't realize it as an insult. Let's fast forward to 2020. President now elect Joe Biden gets on Black people's favorite show, Breakfast Club. What does he say? If you don't vote for me, you ain't Black. That was an insult. But when you are not, when you don't have an intellectual process of Black self-respect, you will continue to be insulted. You will continue to be disenfranchised, and you will continue to stay where you're at in your place in this system. We have to develop an intellectual process of Black self-respect. And we get insulted all the time, and we don't even realize it. We don't even realize it because we only respect the disrespect from Black people.
All this biracial push is anti-Black and racist, and we should be offended. We should be offended that we have been replaced by biracial people. Now, listen to me closely. I'm not saying that it's something wrong with being genetically biracial. I'm talking about how that way of being is being used. Let's be real clear. I mean, Kamala might be the nicest person on earth, but she's being used. And she's so busy caught up in the wonderfulness of her VP status that she ain't nothing but a pawn, an industrial strength pawn. She's the Oprah of politics. That's a whole nother conversation. But the point I'm trying to make to y'all is that we need to understand when we're being used for their purposes. And if you don't understand what Brandon just said regarding being subject to their ethos and being entrenched in their ethos, then we will not know that we're being insulted. That's why I brought up the kafir word, because kafirs are African people or people of African descent, just like us, who had the same word that we had, but it was called kafir, that they are clear enough because of cultural affirmation, which is why we have critical thinking and cultural affirmation. Because of cultural affirmation, they understand, oh, that's an insult. We have to recognize insults. What's the woman's name who got on Ice Cube's case? What's her name? Did you guys talk about her earlier? Vivica Fox did not understand that she had bought the okie doke. She was deep in the trance, and she wasn't even making no sense. Because when you say African Americans, it don't got no penis swinging. It's penis and vaginas. It's everybody. It don't mean just men. And she knows that when she's not in her defensive trance. And we all know that when we say African Americans, that we're talking about the whole community. But when you're in the trance and you bought the white supremacy medicine, you don't know that you're not only have been insulted, but you're actually activating the insult yourself for white people, because that makes no sense. And Ice Cube was, I mean, we don't have to retread on that, but he was doing something for all of us, and he was, and we should have been insulted by Biden willing to have a conversation with Cardi B, who ain't even Black, who's an imposter, instead of Dr. Tommy Curry or somebody with a analysis that went to their school, who's a scholar, who have a PhD on their terms, who could break stuff down in ways that we can actually get that's meaningful. They're playing us, and we should be insulted by Cardi B. Could you imagine Ozzy Osbourne being who white folks interviewed for a political position? It's the equivalent. They would never do that. So we need to have enough sense to be insulted. But you have to love yourself in a white supremacist suit to have enough clarity to be insulted. You have to stop calling yourself an N-word, which implies your lack of worth on a daily basis, to have the clarity to be insulted. So I hope parents are watching this so they can put a wrench into the conveyor belt of anti-Blackness that comes out of Black families inadvertently because of a lack of critical analysis and cultural affirmation.
And Brandon, is there anything you want to add before I?
Sure. I think the Cardi B is another example of something that's brought to us that looks like entertainment, but it really is a disrespectful insult to us as a people.
Yep.
When we're talking about serious matters, and you bring in an entertainer who's not being serious. I mean, she may act like she's being serious, but even in that, she's doing a bird call and she's patting her head and all types of. It's like at some point in time, we have to have Black self-respect and demand it from other people. And in order to do that, we have to be able to use critical thinking skills and shift from that anti-Black kind of trance that we're in. And one thing that I want to add before we close, I think this is important because we started off by talking about Black male and Black female relationships and dynamics. Oftentimes when you hear these conversations, and I've been peeking at a lot of them with all these, virtual town halls and webinars, things like that. What is the answer that all Black people who are confused say we need? We need love. We need love. That we always say we need love, right? Which we do. But see, we haven't even broke down what Black love is supposed to be look like. We think love is an emotional state, so we just all love each other. Everything's going to be okay. But we need Black self-respect, and our love needs to be in action form. We need to do things for the intention of being better. That's what Black love is. It's not just an emotional state. It's in our actions of really trying to take our community to the next level.
I want to reiterate, if I can, Kelly, that getting back to where Brandon brought us, which was the focus on gender dynamics, this biracial, probably for sounding obsessive, but this is just a reality, a strategic reality. This biracial push by the press and by the majority of America's corporations in terms of their commercials and the disproportionate replacement of dual Black parented people with biracial families is an insult. And it's creating a false narrative that they hope will be behaviorized, which is going to have some impact. It's like a lot of our children choose the white doll. The goal of teaching Black people to not look at Black people as objects to love or people to love and build relationships with and build joy with. That's what the media is implying, and it's feeding into the divide. It's difficult to find in popular culture a Black man loving a Black woman down, loving a sister with all her heart, all his heart, and a Black woman loving a man with all. It's very, very difficult, but you can find him hanging off of white folks or somebody who's biracial. I'm not saying to the biracial people that's watching this that something's wrong with you. Again, I'm talking about an external agenda of using people, certain types of people, to create disorientation or disorienting dilemma among Black people so we can stop or never get enough clarity to love each other and resolve our issues. If we don't value each other and look at each other as who we should love, then we're not going to be loyal to each other. And that's another reason for the biracial agenda, because the more Black people who are chasing white folks like crack, then the more of us who are not going to be loyal to Blackness, because we have white in-laws now. And we have white people that we love every day in our bed who we do not want to offend. I mean, look at people like Lee Daniels and others who never critique racism in any kind of real way because they don't want to affect who they're in love with. So the biracial agenda is another strategy piled on top of things we've already talked about, which is the most basically new agenda. Because as I said before, there was a time when they wouldn't have pushed biracial, but they're worried about their numbers, and they're using Black bodies as surrogates. I want you to hear what I'm saying. They're using Black bodies as white survival surrogates, because just like they did in Peru, in Argentina, in parts of Brazil, and parts of Azania, particularly in as a part of Azania, Cape Town, they have created light-skinned people who will be called Black in this country who only marry each other, and white people because white people want to produce more whiteness because they can't do it independently. So they're making us surrogates. And I can prove everything I'm saying. All you gotta do is watch television. If you read statistics on who Black people are marrying, so far, and it's gonna change, but so far, most Black people are marrying Black people. So what they're pushing in the press is a mythological narrative to have a certain outcome that looks like that. That's not really true right now.
Right.
So we have to be mindful of all of the different things that are being done for the purposeful intent of making sure that Black men and women are not like this. Even that article that came out that said Black men are the white supremacists of the Black community, they did something unprecedented. They published that article twice. Mm-hmm. Usually an article is, published once, they go into the net. They republished it twice because the white supremacists behind the agenda wanted to get their hit in to keep the confusion going. And I'm going to reiterate, because I'm glad Brandon brought us back to focus, is that sisters, Black girl magic is cool. Black girl, what's all the different lines? Black girl magic,
amplified Black voices is pretty much Black girl magic. I mean, there's a lot of them. Say her name.
Yeah, and this, I can't think of all of them now, but you deserve that, absolutely. But that you're doing it separate from Black men, and that Black men are not involved or being also given some encouragement to be healed and seen and resolved is dangerous. Right. Black girl magic on an island by itself alone is dangerous. Ain't no such thing as white girl magic. As a matter of fact, half the people that supported Trump to get in the office didn't care that he was a pussy grabber. They were women.
Yeah.
Because they were concerned about white power on a macro level.
Right.
Damn their vaginas. They were looking at the issue of macro power. Well, right. You got to get off that you spend some time on the girl magic island and chill, enjoy yourself, to take a boat to Black men. And actively challenge the idea of a perpetual narrative that only says Black girl magic, without talking about people like Trayvon Martin and Michael Brown and Walter Scott and Eric Garner. Yes, the sister that was murdered in Texas. That's important, but do not take the main target, since we've been in this country, who are murdered and killed and incarcerated the most, which does not mean your pain is irrelevant, sisters. I ain't saying that for a minute. When I was 16 years old, I was involved in the Violence Against movement as a teenager. So I'm down for that. But I also am real clear this late date in my life about the electronic modern day contextual lynching of Black men in concert to the police brutality, which is in your face, that we can all see. That's not good enough for us to have compassion for Black men. You're being seduced with all this Black girl magic, and I forget this those lines, Cal. You the woman.
Black girls rock.
Yeah,
say her name. Uplift Black voices. It's all the same concept.
And I support them, but not by yourself. And remember your babies, the Black boys, that you're raising, who are living amidst a narrative where you have magic and they don't. You should have magic. You've been through it, and you're still going through it. When it comes to Black people, Black women are the ones who go through it. When it comes to women, and when it comes to men, Black men are the ones who go through it. And Black men are hurting. Some of that violence, which you don't deserve, is misdirected rage, because we're going into the umpteenth generation of there being no deconstruction of the impact of Black literal castration and implied castration and law enforcement-based castration. Police brutality is castration,
right?
And we got to have some magic on all levels. Even if women lead the conversation, I don't care if you lead. I love Black women's voices, but you got to create space for Black men to heal, because that's what's going to resolve violence towards you. That's what's going to minimize violence towards you. Divorce, misdirected rage. All Black men want, believe it or not, is love, and to be seen and heard and nurtured and cared about in a society that's perpetually castrating them.
Right. Compliments.
Yes.
Compliments.
That's what we want. And the media is not telling the truth. And you're being played. You're being played.
And when I say compliments, I'm not saying verbally tell us that we're great and we're kings. That's not what I'm saying.
That don't hurt.
When I'm saying it sure don't. Affirmations are always good, whether they're coming from yourself or someone else. Well, what I mean is we need complementarity. We need partners. We need to stop competing against one another and start cooperating. That's how you build community. That's how you build family. So Cleo addressed the women. I'm gonna address the men. In order to do that, we have to make sure what we're bringing to the table is informed for complementarity. We have to make sure that we are stable. We are dealing with our mental and emotional health. We can't let that be the responsibility of our women, but they should definitely be there to support it. We have to be more disciplined with our penises. We have to be more accountable for what we do with our phallus. Like, that's very important, because a lot of our genetic power, which we've already talked about without saying directly, is what they want. But that don't mean we just go slanging it and giving it to everybody, because again, that's how we were brought into this country to a certain extent, and we don't want to go out that same way. And with the agendas that are going on now, they're literally targeting our phalluses. Dr. Francis Cress Welsing warned us about this over 40 years ago. We need to be very clear that this is it's a full court press on what's happening. So we have to make sure that if we're going to be in this system and we want to eradicate it, we got to not just play the game, we got to take it over and dominate to the best of our ability. And that's the fear. The fear is, once we get out of the trance, once we hit the switch on the ethos, and we start understanding that, oh, this is not how this is supposed to be played, that the game's going to switch. Whether we're talking about genetic annihilation, economic empowerment, or just complete dominance and fighting back, resistance, there's a fear there. Don't allow that fear to keep us stuck in the position that we're in, and don't allow the propaganda that has been given to us about our women, or not about our women, how our women function and how we are supposed to be, stop us from being the kings that we should and we are.
And Brandon, could you, if we have time, you do a lot of work surrounding the importance of self-mastery, and I think you just talked a little bit about it. Can you talk a little bit more about the work that you do surrounding that and why that's important for Black men?
Yeah, so in essence, I kind of summed it up with the self-mastery, but at the end of the day, we have to be able to master ourselves. We have to, master our intellectual process, our ability to think. I mean, how many Black men are not thinking for themselves? We think we're thinking for ourselves, but we're really being controlled and aimed in a particular box. And anytime Black men get outside of that box of being the brute who's tough and doesn't smile, being the athlete who can run fast and jump the highest, anytime we get outside of that, when we want to be just the nerd, the Black boy who likes anime, the Black boy who wants to listen to country music or anything like that, what do? We beat each other down. We need to allow space for Black men to just be who they are. I mean, even a same gender loving man. I don't have a problem with folks who are in same gender loving relationships. That has a place in this as well. But what ends up happening? We beat them down because we don't want to understand what that lifestyle is like. We don't want to even give it an opportunity. We can't continue to move forward in this world like that, because we need each and every Black person to be on a similar accord to move forward. And if we're going to keep tearing each other down for small things, that is not self-mastery. Self-mastery is about building your intellectual process. It's about economically trying to be, stable. In this world, we can't get away from it. Capitalism is what it is. We all got a dollar to make, but make sure the way you're making your dollar is smart, the best as you can. Now, we can talk about dismantling capitalism. That's fine. But until that's happening, we need to figure out the best ways to bring resources back into our community to take care of ourselves. We need to educate ourselves. Another important part of self-mastery. And that doesn't mean just getting a high school diploma. That means being able to read legibly, understanding how mathematics works, understanding how this system works so we can stop being victims of it as well when it comes to numbers and percentages. Those things are important. And then ultimately, we need to be intentional with what we do with our own bodies and who we are and how we are developing families. That's very important. Families build communities, but you can't have a healthy family if you don't have healthy adults that are involved. So it's very important that we invest back in ourselves and we invest in building this institution known as family so that we can build out a better community. So those will just be some points that I'll hit high level as we close out.
Can I add to that, Kelly?
Of course.
I agree with everything that Brandon just said, and I want to add, based on some of the technology that I use, one of the strategies we use is something called the benefit factor. And what benefit factor means, after they go through the CTCA process, is look at your behavior and figure out whether it's beneficial or not. Live your life intentionally, not passively. Understand why you do what you do. The whole CTCA process is a process of unpacking particularly damaged goods and replace them with exemplary goods and helpful and constructive goods that are beneficial to being a person of Black descent while navigating in a white supremacist situation. And I also want to touch on, I want to make sure that I iterate to make sure, brothers and sisters, that when you do something, because particularly when you're grown and you biologically can pass for an adult, be able to back up whatever you're doing. Every decision you make, emotional and practical, this is why I'm doing this. This is the benefit of this. This is why this makes sense. Because what might occur if you go through that process, you might go, well, this don't really make no sense what I'm getting ready to do. I ain't going to do that. I'm not going to go around using my phallus, as Brandon said, in ways to combat my insecurity that I need to go somewhere, maybe to Brandon or somebody else who's a therapist, and get some support on, so I can start making my phallus my relevance. Because even a dog has a phallus. So if your relevance is a penis, you got some issues, and you should go to see Brandon as soon as you can. But the other point is that one of the issues that same-gender loving men in particular deal with pushback in our community, and it's part of the lack of resolution, is that a lot of Black men feel castrated and effeminized. And there's another issue that's staying in the secret, is that there's some brothers who have been molested, not only by women, but by males. And there's no place in the culture to provide safe space, even as a child, to go and stop that and resolve that and bring voice to that horror and stop it. So some of these people who are anti-homosexual are projecting their rape onto a same-gender loving person and look at them as somebody who's likely to have done the same thing or did do the same thing or are homosexual because of the same thing. So they have this disdain because of a lack of conversations in the community about the spectrum of sexuality that exists with or without white supremacy. From an African perspective, for example, I can talk about stuff like that, but I don't want to get to that. I just want to talk about, because I'm into context, that since Brandon brought it up, that the reasons for the pushback against same-gender loving people is based on some justifiable trauma that is dysfunctionally addressed, that comes out as misdirected rage, that we need to also talk about. And we don't know our own history. I mean, not only do we not talk about homosexuality, we don't even have functional conversations about heterosexuality. So the whole thing is a loose cannon, which is why I mentioned earlier that we have to talk about the benefit factor. We have to talk about, am I resolved or am I unresolved? Am I still dealing with something happening as a child that's having me act out on this sister or this brother? Am I still acting like an adolescent and dealing with delayed adolescent challenges because I have not resolved my childhood pain? What's going on with me? Am I living my life with a beneficial factor perspective, or am I a pawn for white supremacy because I'm not deconstructing myself and being intentional about how I live on this planet? We got to do that, or else we're going to continue to see things get worse, because there's plans for it to get worse. There's plans for it to get worse. I want to be real clear. But I'm going to end, and I'm going to shut up after I say this. It's preventable. All of it is preventable, Callie. And Brandon already knows this. Everything that we're facing, particularly stuff that's based on myth, because it's myth, that makes it even more preventable. Because it's not based on fact. So everything we're facing, we can resolve. Everything, all of it.
Right, so true. And I think that you both have provided some great solutions tonight, because you're right. A lot of times we kind of just stay in all the problems, but not work towards solutions. But not only have you provided on this platform, but in your life's work, you've also done it as well. So for the Black men that are listening this evening, or maybe their wives are listening, what are some resources? Please provide your email address, and those that are watching, you can definitely find the email and website information in the description box of this program. So please make sure you check that out so you can go and look at all the work that you're doing. But if there's any resources, Brandon, we'll start with you, that Black men can start to take advantage of so that they can begin to heal and begin to lead family and community. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. And if you look down in my name signature, that's my website. So jegna.org. There you can find, I have courses. I have a course on self-mastery, which we talked about. I have a course on the legacy of trauma, which kind of goes through many of the things that myself and Cleo talked about today. But for the free content, definitely check out my YouTube channel, which is Jegna Institute. And then you can search my name, Brandon Jones Jegna. You can find my YouTube channel. I do a live show weekly, and then also have two additional podcasts that are posted there as well. So you can check it out. And if you have any questions or anything from me, you can just contact me through my website.
Okay, I don't know how Brandon did that little fancy name changing stuff that he did and put Jegna up there. I don't know how to do that. But anyway, I'm over here trying to do it, but it didn't work. But anyway, you can find out more about my work at amasi.org. Amasi is spelled Apple, Mary, Apple, Sam, I as an important, amasi.org. And you can see the center. There's descriptions of the work that we do, and some of the things that I just talked about are described as elements of the services that we provide to Black folks. The Amasi Center is the Amasi Center for Black Wellness and Culture, and it's a healing concept and strategy for our community to engage issues that we've raised tonight and the strategies that we've talked about in terms of how to resolve things. My email is Dr. Cleo Manago at bmxnational.org, Dr. Look at Brandon showing off some more. Anyway, it's Dr. I want to do that. I can't do it. It's Dr. Cleo Manago at BMX, that's Berry Mexican X-Ray National.org. You can also go to the Black Men's Exchange website and see work that we do there. But the primary impetus of my work in terms of strategy is listed and described on the Amasi.org website. You can also find me on Facebook, on Instagram, and Twitter as Cleo Manago, and you can ask any further questions if you like. And my organization does live streams every 2 weeks. We have one live stream called Melanated Solutions, where we talk about these issues and solutions. And we have another related podcast called Black Men's Exchange Health Affair. And we talk about how to resolve preventable health challenges that Black people face, like cardiovascular care issues, heart disease, HIV, sexually transmitted diseases, substance abuse, misuse, and different things to get us on a path of solution or prevention when it comes to health risk.
Thank you so much. And don't worry, Cleo, we got you covered. In the description box is all of your contact information. So you don't have to worry about it.
Well, Brandon's still showing out.
I'm a millennial, that's why.
But I would like to
all in my face.
Oh no, see, that's your trauma. That's your trauma.
My trauma.
Well, I would like to thank my guests. Thank you both so much for coming on the platform. You dropped so much knowledge and important information for our community. I'm so appreciative of the work that you are doing in our community. Much respect. Thank you so much. For those that are watching right now, please make sure you subscribe to the Healing Element Podcast YouTube channel. Please also like this video and share. And also make sure you tune in tomorrow at 8 p.m. for part 2. We're going to be talking about getting your financial house in order. This is, again, specifically for Black men. We're going to talk about how you can begin to invest your money, how to set up your retirement plan, how do you set up your will and testament, life insurance policy. We're going to talk about all of that tomorrow. We have a special guest, Raman Haru, who specializes in this type of education. So please come with pens ready, paper ready, and also any questions that you may have. He'll also provide some resources for you if you're looking to go to someone to help you set up your life insurance, retirement, and all that stuff. So please make sure you tune in. Again, that's tomorrow at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on the Healing Element Podcast YouTube channel and also on my Facebook page. Thank you again for everyone who's tuning in. To learn more about my services, please visit kaimarie.com. And I hope to see you all tomorrow. Take care. Have a good night.
Thank you for the invitation.